Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome and hello. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I'm so very happy to be here today in substitute hosting on Point of View for Kirby Anderson. I want to quick give you at the beginning our caller line. It's 800-351-1212. Love to get callers. We have a very packed show today, so you have to, as my mother used to say, listen fast. We have 4 guests coming, just all different topics, and they all really are shaping America's future. I want to start with a story, though, that is, I think, just an amazing, and for this audience, kind of an interesting story that you may have strong views about, and we're happy to take calls on this in the first half an hour. But this story relates to an announcement by the Trump administration that they are going to be working on regulations to essentially define gender biologically. By that, I mean, you may recognize that during the years of President Obama, there was an effort under Title IX, the federal law Title IX, to redefine gender away from what it has been since time began, since humanity existed, which is male and female, and redefine gender into kind of whatever someone claims their gender is or kind of wants their gender to be, the gender identity movement. So the Trump administration announced in a memo that was released to the New York Times that they are going to be essentially redefining or reclaiming the idea of gender. And there are many departments looking at this, but it's starting under Title IX, which is the federal law. It's a federal civil rights law that has been on the books for decades that bans gender discrimination in education programs. It's Title IX that brought, same spending by colleges and athletic teams, male and female. Well, Title IX was the opportunity the Obama administration took to expand the definition of gender. And what the Trump administration is saying is his Department of Health and Human Services, Trump's department, has said that the key government agencies need to adopt an explicit and uniform definition of gender as determined, quote, on a biological basis that is clear, grounded in science, objective, and administrable, like capable of being administered. So this effort right now is just in the department. It began with the Title IX Department of Health and Human Services, with the attempt to expand it into and to reach a uniform definition of gender, which is basically related to the biology with which you were born. So the HHS Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, is also looking to and coordinating with the Department of Education, Department of Justice, Department of Health and Human Services, and Department of Labor. All are going to be working together on getting around to a new definition of gender, which is actually a return to the traditional definition of gender. And this is, of course, causing very alarmed reactions by people on the American left, or really just people who consider themselves to be advocates for the LGBTQ world, and also they include in the LGBTQ the transgender idea, which is that people should be able to be treated as the gender that they claim they are, and they can change their gender during their lives, whether it's just emotionally they change it or whether it is actually pursuing medical treatment of various kinds, hormones and other things, and ultimately surgery as the most radical effort. The reason I want to raise it to this audience, this point of view audience, I think there are just numerous ramifications, and I want to posit them. And if you're interested in calling, again, if you're just tuning in, you're interested in calling and talking about this issue, our caller line is 800-351-1212. And we'll come back to this later in the show, but I wanted to start with this and plant a few seeds for you. To start with, there is a doctor, a woman who's actually the head. Her title is President of the American College of Pediatrics. Her name is Dr. Michelle Cretella. She put out a video which has been all over the internet, but she basically says that at the time of conception, when a child is conceived by its parents, at the moment of conception, that child's gender is implanted, woven into every cell of and the DNA of that unborn child. She's saying it is not humanly possible to change your gender, even if you undergo surgery and pursue other medical care to try to change your gender, that you actually cannot do that. It's not possible. Your body still is as it was born, a boy or a girl. And so she goes on to explain about the idea that she sees that parents and others pushing this gender changing identity, changing your gender identity, is actually disrupting the very foundation of a child's reality testing. She's getting to the idea, if you're a child, as a child, if from the very start of your life, you know what you are, or you begin to know what you are. But if you are told, well, you're not really what you are, even though you can see what you are, it really helps them. Children struggle with the idea of creating a concept of reality. She says, if a child can't trust the reality of their physical bodies, who or what can they trust? Now, the reaction, of course, as I mentioned, from the transgender advocate world is, of course, that this is just so unfair to people who are struggling with their gender identity, that it is just, they say, it flies in the face of science, that doctors and others have acknowledged that some people are challenged with their gender. But that isn't even true. And I want to remind our listeners, I know actually years ago in this show and several times over the years, we've discussed this fact, this reality, that even someone as prominent as Dr. Paul McHugh of the Johns Hopkins Medical Center, he's a psychiatrist there, he spoke of, and he continues to define transgender as a mental disorder, not a real thing, a mental disorder, and the sex change is biologically impossible. So he's been out there arguing from the inception of this gender dysphoria, gender confusion, gender identity issue, that the fact simply is that if someone may struggle, they may truly either perceive themselves as being the gender opposite of which they were born, or they may wish they were or think like the other gender. The simple reality is that people are born with one gender, in one or the other of two genders, and that any attempts to change that is real. Humanly, biologically, medically, doesn't really change their gender. And in fact, what needs to be treated is the mental disorder of believing yourself to be transgendered. The other case or point I wanted to mention before we head off to our break here is that there was another woman doctor, and I didn't find her name before I got here today, but a woman doctor who also wrote about this to say that she categorized the behavior of parents in indulging a small child's statements or fantasies that, he is really a she or she is really a he, that indulging that is in fact child abuse, that it is not, that parents need to work with their kids, talk to them, love them, help them. But she referred to it as straight out child abuse by parents who permit, based on a young child or even up to a teenager's thinking, permit them to pursue changing their gender. And I want to posit this. If we don't talk about it, if we don't get calls on this, I'm going to continue on this topic when we come back from our break. But I really do think, in addition to all the issues about society, it also is quite a commentary in the Trump administration taking on what they had to know was going to be a big, big pushback from their opponents. So I'm Debbie Georgatos, happily substituting for Kirby Anderson. Point of View. Come right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Most Christians understand that the problems facing America are not going to be solved in Washington, but it's noteworthy when a sitting U.S. senator says that politics can't solve our political problems. That was the title of a commentary by Senator Ben Sasse. He believes that the tribalism in our nation has a deeper source and is tied to loneliness in America. We are relational beings and want to be in tribes, and he observes that the traditional tribes that have sustained humans for millennia are simultaneously in collapse. Those would be family, friendships, and communities of worship. At the core of this is loneliness in America. This is not a new problem. A quarter century ago, I wrote a book with the title Signs of Warning, Signs of Hope. One of the chapters dealt with a crisis of loneliness. A book we often quote on our radio program is Bowling Alone, written by Harvard social scientist Robert Putnam. He says we no longer are involved in community. We often move and have few friends, and we have few shared projects and belong to fewer civic groups. On the other hand, we don't want to be left out. We don't want to feel like the same isolation we felt at the edge of the cafeteria or as the last kid picked for kickball. So we yearn for a group, often a political ideology, on the basis of our intimate connections. Our cable news tribes offer a common experience. Now, to reverse these trends, we need to read his new book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. In his commentary, he shares how he and his wife put down roots in a small community and became friends with people from every race and income bracket. We must find ways to replenish the social capital and reverse the tribal conflict in our culture. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Graceworks Pictures, Indivisible, based on the true story of Army Chaplain Darren Turner and his wife Heather. Rated PG-13. Opens October 26th. IndivisibleMovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Debbie Georgatos, and so happy to be substitute hosting for Kirby Anderson. Love doing Point of View. I love doing Point of View on Fridays also. I often join the roundtable on Fridays. We have great discussions. So before I launch back into the Trump administration, going out there, just kind of heading out into the headwinds of saying that they're going to redefine gender back into the two genders which actually exist. I was going to mention something interesting, where this show happens to be recorded in Texas, but around the country, I know it's heard, and early voting has started in many states around the country, including in Texas yesterday. And early voting is through the roof, the numbers showing up, the people showing up. And I saw some data about it that I think is very interesting. In early voting, in all the states in which information was available, Republicans are turning out in early voting in higher numbers than Democrats by a lot, except one state, which I think was Nevada. And I'm not sure, they have probably some particular race there that's driving things, but it's an interesting thing, this blue wave coming, red wave coming argument about the fall elections. I think that there's a lot of passion and fervor on many issues, and people, motivated by supporting President Trump or not supporting him, or maybe they're motivated by other local issues. But I think it's generally a healthy thing that people are wired up to turn out for this election. I also wanted to mention, before I launch back into this gender identity movement or the pushback by the Trump administration to not indulge this gender identity movement, I want to tell you about our guest coming up a little later in the show today. Coming at 12:30 is Lisa Luby Ryan. She is a candidate for Texas State House, and she's just a stellar candidate and a stellar advocate on many issues. And I just wanted to, frankly, I kind of love women candidates. I think that more women should run for office. This is my view, not point of view, but I think more women should. And so she's here going to be talking about the issues driving her race and issues driving the Texas legislature. We also have Rebecca Friedrichs joining us in the next at 1 o'clock. She's the author of a new book called Standing Up to Goliath, Battling States and National Teachers Unions for the Heart and Soul of Our Kids and Country. I've actually met her in the past a couple times, and she's got a great story about her own Supreme Court case involving mandatory union dues, as well as a new book she's writing, trying to speak to parents and teachers about reclaiming education in this country. So she joined us at 1 o'clock. Kelly Kohlberg, if you can imagine this term being used in America, any place in any church that you would know of, rent an evangelical, you'd be thinking, what could that possibly be? She's going to share with us, Kelly Kohlberg, who is the founder of American Association of Evangelicals. She has a new video out talking about how George Soros' money is flooding into organizations who use some name that sounds like, just kind of core Christian values, Christian America. I mean, she'll tell you the names of the groups, but these are groups being paid by the Soros and his various related entities to spread the word and to contort the Christian message in America, contort the Christian vote in favor of left-wing values and really very anti-American values. So she's going to share that. Her new video is out yesterday, so it was very cool to get her on today. And then lastly, we're going to have another guest, Ana Quintana from the Heritage Foundation, and she's going to talk about this caravan coming north from Honduras and what it means for American foreign policy, why it's coming here. So just great stuff. This show will be packed, and on my own radio show, which is called America Can We Talk, make a small pitch for it. It's on Sunday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time on Salem stations, but if you're watching this show on Facebook Live, you can watch my show on Facebook Live also at America Can We Talk, Sunday, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. So back to what I wanted, this amazing story. And I do think this statement by the Trump administration through the Department of Health and Human Services, I'm going to guess they intentionally floated this memo. The New York Times story runs around, New York Times got access to this internal memo. I'm going to guess that the Trump administration went ahead and floated it somehow to the media to begin the national conversation, because that is what is needed. But their statement is they're going to pursue within the Department of Health and Human Services and eventually throughout federal regulations, recapturing the concept of gender. During the Obama era, the concept of gender was expanded to pretty much, gender identity, gender confusion, gender dysphoria, kind of whatever you think you are or wish you were, or at least today want to be, you're allowed to be, and then, exercise that choice you're making in your public life and your life, and be defended by the government, the administration, and the courts. And, the real pragmatic example, you might be thinking, and I think many Christians will, it's like you think, well, in a way, I kind of feel sorry for these people. I mean, they, some of them seem so earnest. They say I was born a boy, but I'm really a woman, or really a girl, or vice versa. And they do struggle. But the question really is for us as Americans is, what is the right answer of government? Is it to indulge that confusion, which the Obama administration chose to try to make it real, which I don't think it is a real thing. I agree with the doctors who have come out saying, psychiatrists, children's specialists, the head of the American Academy of Pediatrics, all these people coming out saying it's not a real thing. It's not like people born with an allergy to peanut butter, and it really is what they have. They have an allergy to peanut butter. This isn't like that. This is a confusion. It's a mental disorder. And so the question is, whether the government should indulge it and protect it, or whether we should say that it's better for society not to indulge it, not to protect it, but instead to have the law be clear about their two genders and define them based on the biology with which you were born, and then let other elements of society can still help people, still offer help, still indulge this preference of people to be to claim a gender other than their own. There are a couple of key points I want to make about this, and if we get back to it later, I want to be sure I have laid these out. One is all that the Trump administration is talking about doing is changing or redefining gender back to what gender was, for most of human history. It's just changing the language and regulations in various departments. It's not changing or limiting in any way the ability of an individual adult to choose to change gender. It's not limiting, it's not punishing, it's not doing anything to them. The choice can still be made by an individual who wants to pursue that choice, to make that choice to change gender. It also does not impact how private institutions choose to respond to that, and how private individuals choose to respond to that. If you if you think that that's a good idea to treat people with the gender with which they identify, you can do that. But some ways the formal legalization of the just evisceration of the real idea of gender under the Obama era, some of the pragmatic consequences were things like the whole bathroom bills, all the identity of women's privacy in the bathroom and who can use which bathrooms. That was one issue. But it was also things like, and you see stories, we see it in Texas, I'm sure you see it wherever you're hearing this, that you see stories like a high school track and field event where, kids are competing with the hope ultimately of ending up in a college scholarship or getting to play or run their sport or do their sport in college. And girls who've been training for years are then defeated in races and competitions by an individual who is male in terms of the gender in which they were born, but because they identify as a female, they can claim under this Title IX and the impact of Title IX that they can compete in events for girls. So you have boys winning the girls' 100-yard dash, girls, whatever the race is, and they're not really girls. And the reason that matters is because we're supposed that whole idea of Title IX was to be fairer to girls and to women, to have more ability of women to receive credit for their athletic skills, possible scholarships. So it's had a very pragmatic and negative impact on competitive girls to let boys claim they're girls. It's also had a dangerous impact, an unhealthy impact in the conduct of high school restrooms. And what if you are a girl and a guy who's got the male anatomy, says he's a girl and wants to use the girls' showers, the girls' changing area, the girls' locker room? That has been a struggle too. And so I think that this, it's really So I think that it has had pragmatic and harmful impacts on children and on people. The last little element of this that I'll tease it now, maybe we'll come back to it later, is because of this transgender movement, this assertion that people can be whatever gender they choose to be, we've now had states, and at least New York City says on your birth certificate, you don't have to pick male or female. You can pick to be decided. And we have parents advocating, well, why can't parents not say anything to the child about his or her gender and wait till the child, some advocates are saying till 4 years old, that then when they're 4, you can put the question to them, do you want to be a girl or boy? As though it's a choice, as though otherwise, you could have been either, but you chose one, not the other. This is the craziness where this issues come down to. So I'm Debbie Georgatos. I'm filling in for Kirby Anderson on Point of View. Lots of fun. Coming up next, Lisa Luby Ryan, a Texas State candidate and great friend. Come right back.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers, defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a Truth Team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I just love when I get to sit in this beautiful studio and sit in Kirby Anderson's chair and substitute host on Point of View. And as I mentioned before the break, we have a guest in studio, Lisa Luby Ryan. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. I'm happy to see you. It's fun to have you in studio right across from me. So I was telling our listeners in the first segment that you're a longtime friend, but you're also a candidate for the Texas State Legislature. And my little plug, more women need to run for office. I'm in favor of that. But, you know, I think it's interesting because Texas is like a bellwether for the conservative values in this country. I just think many people look at Texas and they wait for us to, you know, show them the way, show them how we should handle things. So there's one big issue. I'm just going to jump right in. I do want to hear about your campaign. You can talk about that for 1 minute. But then I want to ask you how you view, what do you think about this caravan we're hearing about is coming from Honduras through Guatemala, through Mexico, up to our southern border. But first of all, just tell your listeners, our listeners, why in the world are you running for Texas State Legislature and how's it all going?
It's going great, Debbie. It's the most amazing thing I've ever done in my lifetime. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my lifetime. But it's I came here 34 years ago with a suitcase in hand and have been able to start from scratch 5 businesses, raise 2 amazing young men, have worked in the political party, the Republican Party, for 20 years plus with you, and have served on many boards. And you know what? I asked the question, you know, what's next? Use me, send me. And this is my way of giving back. I want everybody to have the same opportunities in Texas and in America that I've had. And I see what the other side is trying to do. So I'm just a normal person. I'm a mom. I'm an entrepreneur who said, actually, you were one of the ones that called to recruit me to do this about a year ago, and we've not looked back. And you know what? It would be an honor to serve. And I have given out, as you know, my mobile number to over 60,000 households.
This was one questionable judgment you made. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
But you know what? It's because I have no agenda other than to serve my district and I want my district to know me and I want to know them. So that's why I've done it. I've given people, and people do call. And you know what? We help them or we direct them. And normally it's local issues or federal issues, but we make sure they get the help they get. So I'm just humbled and value that they would trust me and have the confidence in me to represent them in an honorable way.
So you are on the ballot. This has to be an amazing time for every candidate all across this country. You know, campaigns, you mentioned yours starting about a year ago. Some campaigns go even longer, and it occupies your life for days and days and weeks and months. And so now, at least here in Texas, we're in early voting. Other states have started earlier. Other states are still coming up. It's a huge thing to do, just huge to do. So I want to turn to the one issue that people see just on the headlines all the time is this caravan of Honduran, poverty-stricken Honduran people leaving the country of Honduras. And there's a caravan making its way up it goes Honduras to Guatemala to Mexico. The goal is to get to America and to present themselves as asylum seekers. And the range, I think it started at 4,000 people, and then 7,000 was the latest I heard. You may have heard higher numbers, but, you know, this is going to be at the Texas border, and you might be in the Texas legislature. So I just love, what are your views about this?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I've had a couple conversations just about it today with my voters. But I think, Debbie, it's an invasion of our country. We cannot let this happen. You know, if we let this 4, 5, 7,000, however many come through, where does it stop? Who's going to house them? Who's going to feed them? This is not about being insensitive to them. I understand why they want to come here. You know, we're the greatest country in the world. You know, they want better for their family, but you know what? They need leaders in their own country. They need to raise leaders up from their own people and keep them there and build a lifestyle for them there. But, you know, it was interesting. I had a volunteer this morning, a Democrat volunteer for a candidate at the polls this morning. And we started visiting, and he said, "What do you think about this border?" I said, "You tell me what you think about this border." And he said, "I'm an American citizen for 3 years from Mexico." He goes, "We cannot let it happen." as a Democrat, he's concerned. I said, what should we do about it? And he said, we have got to secure our borders. This is a young entrepreneur who says we cannot let them in. It's got to stop. Because if you let these in, everybody else is going to come. It's just too easy.
The next caravan, the next caravan, the next caravan. You know, it's interesting. Later in the show, I'll tell you, for our listeners who are going to be with us for 3 hours, we have Ana Quintana from the Heritage Foundation, who's actually visited Honduras several times recently. She's going to bring a legal perspective to what's happening down there and who's funding this, and not just funding it, but who's encouraging it, who benefits politically. But back to the reaction of this young man who's a Mexican native, American citizen, who's saying we have to stop this. I think this is a big test for a lot of conservatives, because it's an easy emotion, twisting the heartstrings. They are poor. I mean, Honduras is, I read the number recently. It's something like the average person there earns $230 a month or something like that. I mean, they are hungry. They've been hungry for decades. They have, America sends about $100 million of aid every year, and there are 8 million people there. Everybody's hungry. That's $12 a person or something like that. I mean, everybody's hungry there. No one's denying. But it's a really that they are. I was going to share one thought, which is off of what we're going to head to. But on my own radio show, I had Alan West on one time, and we were talking about the Islamic refugees and the invasion of Europe and all that's happening over there. And he said, "Where are the men who will stand for their own country? Where are the men who say, instead of running away, where are the men who say, we can't let this invade our country?" It's, every country could have, every invasion happens. If everyone flees, then the invaders win. And there's something like that that's true about this situation in Honduras. Where are the people to rise up, like you were saying, and change things down there? There's no need. They don't all have to be starving. They have a country. They have people who want to work. They obviously have problems that have to be fixed. And the people some group of them should be encouraged to try to fix the place.
That's right, and build their own country up. But I find it interesting. We were just having a conversation before I came on and talking about they're coming here because of what America offers. But yet the left here in America are trying to do away and make our country more like Honduras. And before long, that's what we'll be. And you know what? I do think, Debbie, between President Trump and this election, I mean, we've had record numbers. Collin County doubled its voting numbers yesterday. Dallas County almost doubled its vote. People are standing up like never before. And it's exciting. It was exciting to see America at its finest yesterday, and people coming to voice and say, they're getting off the sidelines. I have people all the time say, okay, they were coming off the sidelines for the Kavanaugh. Now they're coming off the sidelines because you know what? Trump has proven that he does what he says he's going to do.
Yeah, and on this particular issue, one of the strongest issues that Donald Trump, probably a seminal issue people associate with his campaign, was a notion of securing the borders, which is, easily or criticized by the left as, oh, you're just trying to keep people out who don't look like you. You're xenophobic. But the notion of reasserting kind of the identity of America, you're not a country if you don't have a border. You're just a piece of dirt on the planet Earth. To be a country, and especially to America, you have to have an identity. You have to have citizenship matters. You have to have the understanding of who's here and whether they can stay or not stay. And you have to have citizenship standards that say you've got to buy into our system. Mm-hmm. You can't bring communism here, and frankly, you shouldn't bring socialism here. You can't bring a lot of bad things here. You've got to buy into what America is. So I think he's inspired people on the election numbers I mentioned before the break or sometime earlier. This is record turnout. You're talking about in Texas, all over the country. Of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 8 states in which data was available from early voting, overwhelmingly Republican. And so I think I'm not sure this blue wave is coming. But anyway, So Lisa Luby Ryan, with whom we're speaking, go ahead.
Well, I just want to go back to this one thing, this young man that I was speaking with before. He came to our country and he did it the right way. And he's angry that we would even consider letting these people who we don't know, and we are a land of law and order, to come in and everything goes away if that happens. The due process goes away, but someone has to stand up and give us a process. And I want people to come in and have a front door experience, not a back door experience.
Love that. I also, on the maybe we'll have to wait till after the break to go through this, but we do have asylum laws in this country, and asylum is a very specific requirement. There's a set of requirements. You have to meet one of the standards, or else to apply for asylum. And poverty in your home country is not one of them. If people want to say poverty in your home country should be a standard through which you can seek asylum, then they need to try to make that change in federal law in Washington, and then we can talk about it. But just poverty, horrible as it is not a reason to grant asylum. And that's essentially what all these people are saying is because we're poor, we get to come here and you have to let us in. I'm Debbie Georgatos with Lisa Luby Ryan, filling in and pointing for Kirby Anderson. Come right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Most residents of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania probably have no idea what their county seal looks like. It has a cow, factories, a silo, an oil lamp set on 2 books, a courthouse, flags and bunting, and more. Recently, a federal district court reluctantly declared the seal unconstitutional because, centered in the background of it all, is a cross. According to the court's opinion, quote, the county has not legally compelled its citizens to practice and conform to Christianity, infringed on freedom of conscience, or created political conflict between the Christian church and other religious sects. Simply put, the county of Lehigh did not intend to establish religion or institute a county religion, unquote. And so the court concluded, quote, Lehigh County's seal is a passive symbol that does not coerce any citizen to practice or adhere to Christianity and does not establish a county religion. Thus, the seal does not violate the plain text of the Establishment Clause, nor does it establish a religion in the way the drafters of the First Amendment imagined. Higher courts, however, have delineated a different mechanism by which the court must determine whether the seal survives constitutional scrutiny. While the court may not fully agree with the test provided, the court must apply that test, unquote. Well, we can only hope an appeal will change that test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Students and teachers are being told that prayer, Bibles, and religion are illegal in public school, but that's not true. Learn the facts. Read your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org right now. Don't let anyone steal your freedom with bad information. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Debbie Georgatos, filling in for Kirby Anderson. I have Lisa Luby Ryan in studio. She's a candidate for the Texas State House. And we were talking before the break about the caravan coming up and soon to be probably right around Election Day. How coincidental is that this Honduran group will be at the Texan border? But the next thing I want to ask you, it's a funny thing in campaigns in America. I was reading about other states were looking to Texas to realize how active Texas is in this campaign operation of door knocking, and how it just kind of fallen by the wayside in other states. And Texas, we're kind of famous for it. But heaven knows I've worked on many campaigns. You have been the most avid, relentless door knocker candidate I have ever been around. So you're knocking on the doors of Texans in your house, what will be your House district. So what are people upset about? Like, I really do want to hear, what do people tell you? This is why, this is what I want you to do if you get elected.
Well, first of all, let me say that I've knocked on personally over 6,000 doors. My campaign has knocked on over 15,000 doors. And like I said before, I'm going to represent House District 114. And I need to know what their issues are. And how am I going to learn those issues without developing relationships with them? And first of all, they're impressed that a candidate's there. And two, they tell me, they have me, they capture me, and I've got to keep moving. But I listen. Two things that I hear from the east side straight across to the west side is property taxes and school finance. Those are the one and two, top two things on their mind.
Okay, so on property taxes, and those of you who are not blessed to live in Texas don't realize we don't have a state income tax in Texas. We do have a sales tax, and we do have property tax and other taxes, but we don't have that. Income tax is not part of our formula here, and I don't think it ever will be. But on property taxes, people do. There's a big lament, as there is in other parts of the country, about how you buy your home, you can make your payments, but if your property taxes keep going up, your property taxes could actually price you out of your home. Does that actually happen, though?
Well, yes, it has happened, and I hear it's interesting. I hear it from the young families who I love to hear that they've stretched themselves, getting into these homes for their first-time home buyers. And they're on a fixed income. They both have salaries. And year after year, their taxes are going up. They did not budget for that large increase. And then I talked to the seniors who have lived in their homes for 30, 40, 50 years who are being priced out and having to sell. I even know people, Debbie, that you would know who are having to sell their homes because of the property taxes. And, the governor, Abbott, has supported me. I support him. And he's proposed a 2.5% cap on local taxes.
Is that a 2.5% property tax on local taxes? And is there some penalty if the local entities try to go above that? They can put it to the voters. Is that right?
Yes. So if they need to raise their property taxes over 2.5%, then the voters get to vote on it.
And isn't it something like the voters have to do? It's at 2/3. Isn't it to some magical? It's not just 51%.
Right. It's like 2/3. Exactly.
Okay.
You're exactly right.
So those are the two big issues in the legislature. But as I've heard you say before, there are about 7,000 bills or something that come to the floor of the Texas House. So what are you going to do to get down there to fix these two things?
Well, first of all, if I didn't think I could take my leadership and business skills down with me, I wouldn't be doing this. I'm going to go make a difference. I'm going to fight on behalf of our district. But I think that we need to go down there. We've kicked the can down the road way too long. We've passed it down just from legislature to legislature. So I want to go put 6,998 bills in the back room, and let's go from day one. And you can't do property taxes without school finance reform.
Like
hand
intermingled,
in hand.
yeah.
Exactly. Let's lock that capital down. Let's go. Seriously, this has got to be what... You know what? The voters don't care about. They do, but they don't. The 6,998 other votes or bills coming forth. They want to know that we're going to go help them. I've given them my word that we're going to. And if we as Republicans who have the majority of the House, probably, again, if we don't do it, then you know what? Shame on us.
But see, these are the hardest ones, and I think this happens in Washington and Austin and capitals around the country. These really hard issues, candidates can talk about it. They in their little speeches, in their town halls, but you get, rubber meets the road in the legislature, in Austin or in Washington, and it's so hard because at the end of the day, you're going to have to make some hard choices to get these things to work, school financing and property tax, right?
That's exactly right. And first of all, people say, I've heard politicians say this forever, why are you different? How are you different? I said, well, first of all, I don't care if I'm reelected, and it's not my identity. And second, you know what? We've got to go down there. For way too long, we've been doing baseline budgets. We just keep adding to, more money, more money. I am a strong believer in my business and at home that we go to baseline budgets. Zero base budgets. And we start every year. Our needs are different every single year. And we owe that to the taxpayers to be a good steward of their money. And this is Texas, and the rest of America is looking to us to lead the way and to show them it can be done.
I love that. And for our listeners, I would just tell you, I love those terms, the zero base versus baseline budgeting and the easiest example is if every year the EPA, or the last legislative cycle in Washington, the EPA had a $100 million budget, which is way more than that, had $100 million. So the next year when Congress is making the budget, if you have baseline budgeting, you assume EPA still needs $100 million. How much more do they need? So you add on every time, versus every legislative cycle, you say, okay, we have this much money. How much can we afford to give to the EPA? And that is zero-based budgeting. We're starting at zero, deciding what we can afford to give to you out of our tax dollars, and then you have to make do with that. It will be a monumental change in Washington, in Austin, I think practically every state capital.
Yeah, and it can be done. It's just going to take a little time to be done. But, you know, in the state of Texas, our Constitution says we cannot go over budget. And so, you know, people want more, more, more. Where are they going to get it? What can they take out of the pie to get more? We're going to do less border security, less public safety. That's only $800 million of our $60 billion budget. Or no, not $60 billion, $160 billion budget. And where are we going to take money out of that when we've got 7,000 people about to come over our border? No, security is a core function of government. We have to take care of our people.
I've heard you do, I know we have only a couple of minutes left in this cycle, but I've heard you do this comparison in the past about if you had a clock and you start at 12 and you go around to 6 or 7. The other aspect of budgeting is just that much of the budget in Washington and in Austin is taken up with things you can't really do much about. Can you quickly tell in that, like the 12 to 6 or 7?
Yeah, so if you take the large hand on a clock from 12 all the way down to 7, that is the school budget. That's what we spend on schools. If you go from 7 to 10, that's spent on medical, health care.
Yeah.
If you go from 10 to 11, that's public safety. And if you go from 11 to 12, that's what's left over for infrastructure, clean water, clean air, justice system, any of those leftover things. And 3 line items on our budget takes up 94% of our budget. You know, we've got to go and see what we really need and take care of the needs of the people. And I'm going to do that for my district.
Lisa Luby Ryan, thank you for joining me on Point of View today.
Always fun, Debbie. Thank you.
So fun to have you. Folks, we're going to zip off to a break in just a moment. And we come back after our break. We have joining us at 1 o'clock Rebecca Friedrichs, author of a fabulous new book and an advocate really for teachers and families in America to take back education system, to fight and to remove or reduce the power of the national and state teachers unions, put the power of the teachers and education back in the hands of the teachers and the families. She's a great advocate. She's a litigant in the Supreme Court, and she's joining us at 1 o'clock, so come right back.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. They're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Hello and welcome back to Point of View. I'm Debbie Georgatos, and again, so happy to be sitting in, substitute hosting for Kirby Anderson here on Point of View. This segment, we have joining us a guest, Rebecca Friedrichs, and she's online with us. She's been on my radio show before, and I happened to have seen her recently at a conference, so we've connected a few times. But the reason I invited her to join us today, she's the author of a new book called, it's not even out yet, but it will be out in November, Standing Up to Goliath, Battling State and National Teachers Unions for the Heart and Soul of Our Kids and Country. So hi, Rebecca.
Hello, Debbie. How are you?
I'm well, and I'm so happy to have you online with us today. Well, I want to jump right in because, as I know we've experienced before, time on radio just flies by. You were originally yeah, it sure does. You were originally the plaintiff in a lawsuit related to your requirement to pay teachers' union dues that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And I'm hoping to just give our listeners a quick summary of why you filed suit as a California teacher against the teachers' unions.
Sure. So we sued the California Teachers Association and the National Education Association. And the reason was teachers for over 40 years have been forced to fund unions as a condition of employment. And those unions use our money to fund all sorts of policies, curriculums, ideas that are against our moral values, against our beliefs as teachers, against what we think is all good and right for schools. So they are completely unaccountable to teachers. And those of us who served even at, I was on my local union board as a leader, and even at that level, I could not make a difference within the union, because when I would speak up and say, hey, my teacher friends and I we're concerned about the way you're spending all of our money on very divisive politics, dividing our country, harming our students, we would get bullied. We would basically be shaken down and told, too bad, get on board. This is the way it is. And I thought that was wrong. So 10 teachers from California took on those unions, and the state of California intervened against us, as did the Obama administration. So we were 10 teachers against the most powerful unions in the country, against the entire state and
government.
the entire nation, which is why we were David versus Goliath. And you know what? That gave me a lot of peace, because David won.
Yes, I was going to fast forward. So her case, she just described to you, related the teachers' compulsory teacher union dues, got all the way to the Supreme Court, appeared to be headed toward a 5-4 victory for her when, unfortunately, Justice Scalia's untimely and sad passing intervened. And so the case sat there with not an outcome that would have been victorious for her. But that issue was addressed by the Supreme Court in the Janus case, which was essentially the same issue. To be very clear, teachers and other public employees often pay union dues that are directly politically funneled, but they also even pay agency fees. They pay other fees toward union membership, and there's compulsory union membership in some states. So the basic idea of the Janus case, what the Supreme Court decided in June of this year, said for public school teachers and other public employees and who are members of public unions, you do not have to pay any dues to a union if you don't agree with them. And this was a great victory for the teachers' unions. First of all, I know you cheered on the Janus case, and you were a little bit involved in getting that one going. Is that right?
Oh, sure. So it was a victory for teachers, though, not teachers' unions.
For teachers, excuse me, I misspoke. For
the unions
teachers,
were
yes.
very upset about this win. Yeah, well, the Janus case was actually the case that was in line behind my case. And Mark Janus is a friend. He was in the courtroom when my oral arguments were heard at the United States Supreme Court, and he always jokes around that he sat there with my husband saying, "Thank God she's going to win. I'm off the hook." And so our case was heard, like you said. A month later, Justice Scalia died. So we ended up getting a tie. So Mark Janus's case moved forward. What were we fighting for? We were just fighting for the freedom for all government employees to decide for ourselves whether or not to fund unions, period. So in other words, we can't be fired from our job if we don't want to fund a union. So the exciting thing about the Janus win is now all public sector employees, all government employees across the country are now freed from forced unionism. They can join if they want. If they appreciate their union, they can pay for it. If they don't, they can leave and pay nothing. Now, here's what was exciting for me. Sad for me was our case lost on my birthday. So that was a devastation. But the Janus case won on my birthday. So God gave me a little gift there, a big gift.
I should say. Well, let me jump forward then and ask. So this Janus victory happened, but now here we are in October 2018. You have this new book, Standing Up to Goliath, and I noticed one thing that you wrote or the description talked about was that Standing Up to Goliath unmasks those unions, these teacher or public unions, as the root causes of the problems plaguing America's schools and culture. So my question is, given the Janus case went the way of the teachers and freed teachers from the obligation to pay union dues, what are you still fighting for?
So now we fight for freedom, for real freedom. So teachers are now, and other employees, are now free to leave those unions if they want to. Here's why I wrote Standing Up to Goliath, and I honestly believe this might be why the Lord allowed for my case to lose and then another case to come fight the battle for 2 years while I sat at home and wrote a book and did the whole process to get it published, because now we have a win, and now this book can come out. Why did I write it? Teachers have been trapped by state and national teachers' unions in a culture of fear for decades. They use fear, intimidation, isolation, and ignorance to terrorize teachers. Through that ignorance, they tell teachers, "Oh, we're here for you, we're taking care of you." But the truth is, the unions themselves, state and national, are using teacher dues money to fund a divisive political agenda in this country and a very horrific, abusive sexual agenda that they're bringing into our schools and harming our children. Teachers are mortified by it. They have no idea they're the ones funding it. The other reason I wrote it is because leaders on all sides say the same thing. Education is the civil rights issue of our day. I've even heard President Obama say that. But all of those leaders hack at the branches of the problems instead of digging out the diseased root. And that diseased root is state and national teachers unions who are purposely creating all those problems using the billions they collect from dear, loving, sweet teachers who have no idea their money is being used to undermine their faith, undermine their family, undermine their schools, undermine their culture. That's why I wrote Standing Up to Goliath. It's a book full of dozens of personal testimonies, my own and dozens of other teachers, school board members, students, exposing the state and national teachers unions as the money and muscle and just the anger and the attack against good people that is degrading our schools.
Yep, Rebecca, I love it. We're talking to Rebecca Friedrichs, who is going to hang on during our break and be back right after this break. She's the author of Standing Up to Goliath. Don't go away.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Most Christians understand that the problems facing America are not going to be solved in Washington, but it's noteworthy when a sitting U.S. senator says that politics can't solve our political problems. That was the title of a commentary by Senator Ben Sasse. He believes that the tribalism in our nation has a deeper source and is tied to loneliness in America. We are relational beings and want to be in tribes, and he observes that the traditional tribes that have sustained humans for millennia are simultaneously in collapse. Those would be family, friendships, and communities of worship. At the core of this is loneliness in America. This is not a new problem. A quarter century ago, I wrote a book with the title Signs of Warning, Signs of Hope. One of the chapters dealt with a crisis of loneliness. A book we often quote on our radio program is Bowling Alone, written by Harvard social scientist Robert Putnam. He says we no longer are involved in community. We often move and have few friends, and we have few shared projects and belong to fewer civic groups. On the other hand, we don't want to be left out. We don't want to feel like the same isolation we felt at the edge of the cafeteria or as the last kid picked for kickball. So we yearn for a group, often a political ideology, on the basis of our intimate connections. Our cable news tribes offer a common experience. Now, to reverse these trends, we need to read his new book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. In his commentary, he shares how he and his wife put down roots in a small community and became friends with people from every race and income bracket. We must find ways to replenish the social capital and reverse the tribal conflict in our culture. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Graceworks Pictures, Indivisible, based on the true story of Army Chaplain Darren Turner and his wife Heather. Rated PG-13, opens October 26th, indivisiblemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. This is Debbie Georgatos. I'm substitute hosting very happily for Kirby Anderson here on Point of View. I meant to direct you also, our listeners, to our website, thepointofview.net. Pointofview.net. You can not only listen to this show online, you can listen to past shows, put in the search bar and find old shows and things you want to hear. And also, pointofview.net would appreciate your support very, very much. This is a listener-based, as you just heard the announcer say, a listener-based source for truth. So we rely on your donations. So we are talking, as we were before the break, with Rebecca Friedrichs, whose new book coming out in November is called Standing Up to Goliath, Battling State and National Teachers Unions for the Heart and Soul of Our Kids and Country. I love that. But first of all, it's a great picture. I was going to hold it up for our Facebook Live listeners. See, it's really, really great. You'll like that. Okay.
Well, and just so your listeners know, it's actually available right now on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, and it's 40% off on Amazon right now.
Oh, okay.
So they can
Are they
pre-order.
pre-ordering?
They can pre-order, yeah. They just won't receive it until November 20th.
Okay, so this whole concept, I mean, I love. I'm a labor lawyer by background on the management.
Oh, great.
Yeah, on the management side. Oh, totally. And I've always thought whether there should really be any public sector unions. You don't have to opine on that, but I've always thought this unfair to the American public, to the taxpayer, because they're not really at the negotiating table when all their tax dollars being negotiated away. But back to what your point is, in the American public schools. So you're talking about the danger that or the damage that teachers unions do in pushing a radical leftist agenda within the schools, and teachers don't like it, and you're pointing out that their dues are paying for it. So what is the solution? How do we stop that?
Yeah, the solution is I have this program called Adopt a Teacher. Teachers have no idea that they are funding this stuff. I taught 28 years in California public schools. Everybody thinks, oh, California agrees with this agenda. We do not. Teachers in California do not. The teachers' unions have literally planted activist teachers in schools across the country. Those activists have the voice. The rest of us have been bullied, shunned, isolated. I have teacher friends who've spoken up at the state and national levels of the teachers' unions for protection for children against horrific sex ed lessons. They have been spit upon. They have been told there's a special place in hell for people like you. Good and loving teachers, Christian teachers, are being abused and bullied today in our public schools by state and national union leaders. Here's the answer. Please, today, I just plead with your listeners, today, adopt every teacher you know and love. Put your arm around them. I have a little Adopt a Teacher program. Be happy to send it to your website. I just have 6 E's. Embrace the teacher. Educate the teacher by giving them a copy of my book. Just share your copy. You don't even have to buy an extra one. Then enlighten that teacher. Empathize with that teacher. I'm so sorry you have to discover that the $1,200 a year you're paying is going to undermine your own faith, your own school, the children you love, your country. And then encourage them and then empower them. Because what teachers need is they need faith leaders, especially faith leaders. Please, faith leaders, step up. And parents and community members standing around them and saying, we will not put up with this any longer. Teachers don't know that they have the right to decertify or disaffiliate from these state and national unions. They can completely break their legal connection to them, and they can reorganize as a local-only little association. Teachers are afraid to be alone. They love their local association, so they think they love their union, but what they love is their friends standing together. So we can't go to them and say, you got to get rid of your union. Teachers will think they're going to lose their safety net. So we have to help them to understand they already don't like the politics. Break away from the politics. The state and the national will help you. Reorganize as a local only, and we'll love on you and help you. If Americans would do that, we could end this nightmare overnight. We could fix our schools overnight. We could fix our country overnight because the state and national teachers unions are organizing the divisive, angry protests. They're supportive of Black Lives Matter, of those women in the pink hats, all of that stuff. Teachers unions are involved.
It's actually astonishing. And people ask the question frequently, how is it that so many, for example, in journalism, so many journalists are left-wingers? Why is that? And then the same thing, my question to you, because I'm well aware of how leftist the teachers unions are, and I can't remember the topic at the time, but I'd captured statements from their national meetings of the two large, I think there are two large federal, national, statements you could not believe. These sound like Antifa protesters, and these are
They are.
Yeah, and so
they are Antifa protesters. Yes, and I have a lot of that in my book. I show a lot of exactly what you're talking about. The language from their annual meetings is unbelievable, and the things that they adopt.
So how did it get that way? Is this just kind of because the left got diligent, just the way they did in academia and journalism?
I can tell you exactly what happened. There's 2 national teachers unions. One's the American Federation of Teachers. It's the smaller of the 2. They have about 1.4 million members, something like that. They were started by the AFL-CIO, so they were a direct union infiltration of our school system. The National Education Association was started in the 1800s by loving Christian teachers in the public schools who would write these little booklets then their goal was to get the booklets into the hands of every child in America. They're full of scripture. They're full of stories of heroism and love and kindness. They're the sweetest little booklets, and I have some of them. And the unions came in the 60s and infiltrated. I teach that in my book through story. My book is all engaging stories. So one of the stories I have in there is of a teacher named Ruth Finnegan, who's a much older woman now. She's approaching 90. She's a beautiful, wonderful, loving woman. She was teaching, and the unions came in and started telling her and all of her teacher friends that they had to join the union or they were going to lose their jobs and get sued and all this stuff, and bullied them. And everyone joined except Ruth. Everyone told Ruth, I don't want to join, but I'll lose my job if I don't join. Ruth stood firm and said, I'm not joining. So the union sent 5 men in black suits into Ruth's classroom after school when she was alone. A lone, vulnerable teacher. 5 men in black suits. She still didn't join, so they sent them again. This is how they harassed and bullied loving teachers and forced them to join the unions. That's how they started it. Ever since then, they've been bullying us, and then they convince teachers that we need them. Oh, you won't have a good pension, you won't have a good paycheck, you won't have a break, you'll have to wear skirts down to your ankles if we leave. And they say these things. I've heard it all in the union meetings. And teachers believe it. Teachers are terrified. And that's why I tell people you got to adopt teachers. You have to tell them, look, we love you. If you're a good, loving teacher, we love you. We stand with you. Teachers think that Americans don't appreciate them because all they hear is test scores are low, teachers are bad. Well, the unions are bad, and they've brought in some bad teachers, and they defend bad teachers. But the good teachers are working their tail end off and feel very demoralized. Many of them are leaving the profession because they're being bullied out. So that's kind of the highlights of how the unions did it to us.
I'm actually glad you share that story because I did not realize the history of either of those unions. And it is a funny thing. That was one of my questions I had on my little list for you was, how do you convince a teacher who doesn't like the left-wing teaching, left-wing classes and programs and approaches that they're encouraged to do, but they're afraid, well, what if I don't have a pension? They've been taught to believe in the teachers' unions as being their only protection against the cruelty of the school districts. And one other thing I would say about the teachers' unions is, and people believe is, well, this is how you have job security. Otherwise, they might fire you overnight. And so we only have 1 minute left, but your program, you're talking about Adopt a Teacher. It is a vehicle people can use to help teachers understand better what their rights.
Exactly. Adopt a Teacher. Since there's only 1 minute, I would tell the people, get my book, hand it to the teacher, because my book teaches the teachers everything they need to know. Even that, this whole pension thing, the first thing I say to teachers is, what if your pension isn't there for you when you retire? Then they listen, because they think they have security there, and they don't understand that their unions are the ones making their pension vulnerable. So we educate them. We just educate the teachers. We do that through the book. We stand with them, and we help them to learn that they've been duped and they've been used, and we help them to break free. And once they learn all the details, that's why I had to write a whole book, because there's so much deceit. Teachers have been lied to for so long. So that's kind of the highlights. I'd love to come back and share more at some point.
Rebecca, I'm so glad you're available to join us today in Point of View. And if you're just tuning in, sorry for you, but we are speaking with Rebecca Friedrichs. She is the author of Standing Up to Goliath. And the subtitle is Battling State and National and Teachers Unions for the Heart and Soul of Our Kids and Country. She has an Adopt a Teacher program. You can order her book right now on Amazon. Order a bunch and give it to your teacher friends for Christmas. There's a good idea. Rebecca, thank you.
That's exactly what I'm asking. And they can get the Adopt a Teacher directions on my website at forkidsandcountry.org. It's right there, Adopt a Teacher.
Rebecca Friedrichs, thank you so very much, folks. This is Point of View. Debbie Georgatos. Come right back after our break.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor, and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you, 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Debbie Georgatos, filling in for Kirby Anderson on Point of View. Just love being here. And this is a show packed with guests. And today, this segment, we have another guest joining us, Kelly Kullberg. And I believe we have her online, but I'm going to give you just a moment's introduction about Kelly. She is Kelly Monroe Kullberg. She is the author of editor and co-author of this amazing book, Finding God at Harvard. I think the title captures a lot right there, Finding God at Harvard. She's also the founder of the Veritas Forum, which is on campuses all around America. And she is also the founder and spokesperson for the American Association of Evangelicals. I invited her on today because I want to have her talk with us about an amazing thing. You just think this would be you can't believe this could be a real thing, but George Soros's rented evangelical program. I believe we have Kelly online. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for having me.
Love having you on. I wanted to be sure and have our listeners know how you're just rooted in your life's work has been. You're founder of the American Association for Evangelicals. Just trying to hold down the fort for America, for Christianity, through your work in many ways. But your organization had a news release yesterday, and I was so glad that today was the day I was working on Point of View that I could get a hold of it. You had a news release of a video related to George Soros's, and we were calling it Rented Evangelicals. I just want to quick play that, and then we can talk about it. So if you are ready with that segment.
To give the impression of the moral high ground, the Soros Network funds what they call evangelical and Catholic mascots to serve as surprising validators for their anti-Christian projects and candidates. Imagine the evil of using a Christian front to de-Christianize the culture and nation. In this video clip from the New America Foundation, an executive admits their rent an evangelical model of social change.
Doing a sort of rent an evangelical, as we used to call it on the national security side, rent a general model.
The network funds religious groups including Jim Wallace's Sojourners, PICO, Faith in Public Life, Faithful America, Richard Cizik's New Evangelical Partnership, Telos, J Street, National Council of Churches, Evangelicals for Human Life, Catholics United, Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, Catholics for Choice, and through the network's National Immigration Forum, they fund religious groups advancing open borders, amnesty, and voter registration for their new America. Are these groups transparent about the Soros Network funding? Not typically. In a 2010 interview, Reverend Jim Wallace, a longtime leader of this movement, was asked if his Sojourners was funded by Soros. Here is Reverend Wallace's response in his own voice.
No, we don't receive money from Soros. No, I mean, the financial crisis that nonprofits are in, including us. Why is it he should call Soros and ask him to send us some money? No, we don't receive money from George Soros. Our books are totally open, always have been. Our money comes from Christians who support us and who read Sojourners. That's where it comes from.
Soon, grants from Soros to Wallace disappeared from the Open Society website. But when journalists found the money trail, Wallace was forced to admit the truth. Rather than advancing the whole counsel of Scripture as the highest love for people and culture, these useful ministers assist non-Christian policies, projects, and politicians with faith words, optics, organizing, and media to confuse Christian and other value voters, to recruit the church into their radical political agenda, and to help the left's politicians get elected.
Okay, so Kelly Kullberg, that was the video, the shorter version, 3-minute version of a video released yesterday by the American Association of Evangelicals. We're speaking with Kelly Kullberg, the founder and spokesperson. So let me just start with Kelly, just for our listeners who may not know, although I'm going to guess all of our listeners do. Who is George Soros? Who's this guy who's funding this rented evangelical program?
Right. Let me just explain if folks want to share that on Facebook or something, or see it again, go to AmericanEvangelicals.com, AmericanEvangelicals.com. And, I was happy doing Christian apologetics with the Veritas Forum, and my husband wrote a novel called Breaking Babel that predicted, he didn't know about Soros, he predicted an atheist, globalist billionaire trying to swing the U.S. election by funding kind of fake ministers to divide the Christian vote, to confuse and divide the red states and the Christian vote. Very clever. I thought it was very far-fetched. And then 10 years later, we began to research Soros's Open Society Foundation and follow the money to Jim Wallace, whose voice you just heard, denying the money and then getting caught with it. So who is George Soros? He was born in Budapest, Hungary, to a globalist named Tivadar Schwartz, his father. They were Jewish by background, though atheists. They helped the Nazis acquire assets from the Jews. They changed their name to Soros. They moved to London. Soros became a hedge fund guy, quantum fund, etc. Famously broke the Bank of England in a day, became a convicted felon in France for insider trading. He's run out of most countries he's ever lived in, but unfortunately he's been in America for a few decades. And he's really the money behind the major first money behind the new far-left Democrat Party, founder of the Open Society Foundation, now $25 billion with a B dollar foundation, funding left-wing, the grievance and anarchy industry, hundreds and hundreds of fronts and organizations that always have nice names. Equality this and justice that, and American something, and free press to shut down conservative talk radio. It's always ironic, and he's a prime mover behind both these organizations and a lot of leftist politicians, including Andrew Gillum and many others. So open borders, drug legalization, breakdown of the family, anything to weaken sovereign nations.
Yeah, that was a good summary. I was actually trying to take notes and I couldn't keep up with you. But it's a good summary of George Soros because, in essence, much of what he funds through his massive wealth you were just describing is things that unsettle America, things that attack kind of core foundational values of America, principles of America, societal structure, but always from the perspective through the names of the organizations and the projects sounding like they're trying to help. It's about justice or fairness or goodness or something nice. Well, so he's done this in countless ways. I'm glad you began a litany of the kinds of things he's done. But the particular thing you're exposing in this video is that is a conscious use of people representing themselves as Christian ministries, Christian movements, funding them to urge Christianity to stand for views that are antithetical to Christian values. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, Debbie. What happened was Soros's team lost the Al Gore 2000 election and then John Kerry in 2004, and there was this sort of famous meeting, sometimes called the Thunder Road Group, in his home, apparently, in New York. And he said, why are we losing? And the answer, there are various responses. I wasn't there, but the books have been written. But what they learned to do was they had to use what they call the faith narrative to confuse and divide the natural Christian tendency to vote for the Republican Party, which is, generally pro-life, pro-family, for the U.S. Constitution, for a sovereign nation. Soros weakens sovereign nations so that his circle has more global power. He's doing this all throughout the world. It's the greatest untold story. And so they began to fund sojourners and Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good and Faithful America and Faith in Public Life and on and on. It's in the 3-minute video, and a letter to follow. I hope folks will read and sign the letter, a call to repentance. But it's very, it's as old as the Garden of Eden, right? It's just how to mock God, how to make words mean what they
don't mean.
Words. and so Jesus said, "Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." So Soros began through Open Society Foundation funding Jim Wallace's Sojourners and other groups for two things in the beginning. This is around 2004. Number one, to recruit churches and Christians into the progressive cause, and two, to give a false faith narrative for open borders, amnesty.
I got to jump in. Kelly Kohlberg, hold on. We'll come back after the break. Debbie Georgatos, Point of View. Right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Most residents of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania probably have no idea what their county seal looks like. It has a cow, factories, a silo, an oil lamp set on 2 books, a courthouse, flags and bunting, and more. Recently, a federal district court reluctantly declared the seal unconstitutional because, centered in the background of it all, is a cross. According to the court's opinion, quote, the county has not legally compelled its citizens to practice and conform to Christianity, infringed on freedom of conscience, or created political conflict between the Christian church and other religious sects. Simply put, the county of Lehigh did not intend to establish religion or institute a county religion, unquote. And so the court concluded, quote, Lehigh County's seal is a passive symbol that does not coerce any citizen to practice or adhere to Christianity and does not establish a county religion. Thus, the seal does not violate the plain text of the Establishment Clause, nor does it establish a religion in the way the drafters of the First Amendment imagined. Higher courts, however, have delineated a different mechanism by which the court must determine whether the seal survives constitutional scrutiny. While the court may not fully agree with the test provided, the court must apply that test, unquote. Well, we can only hope an appeal will change that test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Students and teachers are being told that prayer, Bibles, and religion are illegal in public school, but that's not true. Learn the facts. Read your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org right now. Don't let anyone steal your freedom with bad information. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. And we still have online, I'm so glad, we still have online Kelly Kohlberg. And if you are just tuning in now, she is, I first want to mention, she's the editor and co-author of this best-selling Finding God at Harvard, the founder of the Veritas Forum and Universities, and also the founder and spokesperson for the American Association of Evangelicals. Our topic today is a press release their organization put out yesterday. There's a 3-minute video. We played the audio early in the last segment, and you can find it and play it yourself and share it with your friends. But the point of it is that there is an actual rented evangelical effort by the George Soros organization and related organizations, Open Society and other organizations, to delude, trick, and dupe American Christian voters into embracing anti-Christian left-wing views because they're presented under the guise of organizations that have very happy talk, friendly sounding American names. So, Kelly, I'm hoping we still have you online.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you, there was actually information about this effort, this rented evangelical thing, actually including a tour driving around America during this election cycle, spreading this. I can't remember if that's something that you talked about in your video or in your release.
There have been articles about it. So these rented evangelical ministers are now on buses. They've come through Texas. They've come through the Midwest, and now they're in California. And that's funded by several leftist billionaires, Eric Hadar, as well as many connections to George Soros. Why? Because they know that 82% of evangelicals voted for President Trump and the Republican Party of Faith and Freedom and Life. And so it would be very effective for Soros to confuse and weaken and divide that voting base. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. It's called Vote Common Good, and also reclaiming Jesus. And I've raised this publicly. One, I think everyone deserves to know what the money is behind these organizations, and it's the agenda. And number two, I'm asking these leftist ministers on buses in swing states, common good for whom? It's not common. The Democrat Party is not common good for unborn children. It's not common good for people in inner cities where when Democrats are running them, we see an increase of crime and drugs and loss of jobs. It's not common good for Christian business owners being bullied and sued. It's not common good for children in schools learning aberrant sexuality and twisted U.S. history. It's not common good for the handicapped and elderly. Soros wants euthanasia next, anything to weaken us. And it's, not common good for Israel that's being assaulted by these groups. Theologically, this doesn't make sense to, we should say that's not common good. It's uncommon harm. And we're going to take our word love back as well as progress. It was covenant, the old news, Debbie, the regress was polygamy and pedophilia and pansexuality, anything goes. It was covenant marriage that brought women, men, children out of poverty, out of disease and loneliness. That was the breakout. That was the progress. And wherever we see that, we see flourishing families as building blocks of flourishing cultures. We have to take our words back, I think, we formed this loose, wonderful coalition growing by 1,000 people a day called American Association of Evangelicals. At AmericanEvangelicals.com, please feel free to come, watch our videos, put your email in, and stay in touch. There's no money behind it. There's no, it doesn't cost anything to join. And we want to do three things: share the Christ-centered gospel. Number two, teach biblical worldview on issues. And number three, engage opposition to the gospel in the nation, the American Association of Evangelicals.
I love that. One point I wanted to make, too, okay, again, I'm trying to take notes while you're talking, but the other thing, Kelly, you pointed out, which is so true, that part of what these groups do, these Soros-funded groups, is to cherry-pick scriptural passages. And I noticed driving back to our house, near our home here in Dallas, there was a pretty big church that had on their billboard in the front, essentially it had, and I can't remember the exact scriptural passage, but it was basically saying, Jesus welcomes strangers. And it was an immigration, it was a pro-immigration.
Matthew 24:25.
Yeah, but the basic point of it is cherry picking that to say the implication was that we need to, for example, welcome these Honduran caravan coming through a southern border, legalize everyone who's here illegally. It takes a tiny message of scripture out of context and then says basically that means this has to be the policy of America. And I wanted you to elaborate on that cherry picking of scripture.
You're so right to bring this up. It's very important for people to understand that this is how the Soros groups work. Is they were hugely funded for I Was a Stranger and You Welcomed Me as a campaign, multi-media, million-dollar media campaign that ran and this is what they did not tell people. It ran exactly with the Schumer-Rubio Gang of Eight, huge 1,000-page bill that would have given America amnesty before the 2016 election. It would have given us Hillary Clinton for president, probably. And this got through the Harry Reid Senate into the House with John Boehner, and we had the Soros ministers out in front of the Capitol leading 40 days of prayer and fasting. Well, they lied to the American people. It was a political hit job, and this is what they do. And so it was to pass a piece of it was political. It was to pass a piece of legislation. I was asked, would you sign this? Kelly, hit this email button, 10 seconds. Do you think God loves everyone in the world? Of course. But I didn't because I didn't trust the people behind it. They ended up using the names of the 170 evangelical leaders who hit the button in a letter to President Obama and Congress. These leaders demand the passage of this bill. That's how the Soros groups work. It is wicked. It's unloving, and we're calling it out. They're hugely funded for open borders, amnesty, quick voter registration, and essentially voter fraud, because Soros wants a permanent progressive majority, not a constitutional republic, not the true America, but his version of the, quote, new America. And it's that they're renting evangelicals, and we need to call it out because of love.
I love that. And one expression you use quite often, we're speaking with Kelly Kullberg, whose film, a little 3-minute video you've just simply got to go and check out and understand, which I'll let her say the website name again, and we're near the end here, but I love the expression you use, rejecting cherry-picking Bible verses for political power. The American Association of Evangelicals urges a return to the whole counsel of Scripture as the highest love for human beings. I love that. So well said. So Kelly Kullberg, very quickly, right out of time, what is your website people can go to and read more about this and see the video?
American Evangelicals with an S.com, AmericanEvangelicals.com. 2 short videos show your Bible studies and your families, your churches. Sign the letter and join our sort of Gideon's army that's growing.
Love that. Kelly Kullberg, first of all, thanks for calling in today, and thank you for all your great work on behalf of this enormously important issue. Thank you.
You too, Debbie. Thank you.
Okay, folks, when we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit more about this because it just is a stellar thing she's uncovered, so sinister, so evil, and so important to understand so Christians in America are not duped. Debbie Georgatos and Point of View, come right back.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you: 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And hello there, and welcome again. I'm Debbie Georgatos, filling in for Kirby Anderson. Point of View. Love coming to this beautiful studio. Love filling in for Kirby Anderson. Our caller line, if you'd like to call in to discuss any of the topics we've talked about today, is 800-351-1212. And also, if you're listening to this show, whether it's your first time or you hardly ever miss it, I do encourage you to go to pointofview.net. It is the website for this radio show. You can watch online. You can listen online. You can go back and look at old shows, look at the topics. You could also go to links where the topics that we're discussing today or any other days, you can go and read the articles yourself. Point of View is a wonderful service appreciated by millions of Americans, and it is our listener-supported source for truth. So we do rely on donations from listeners. Would love your support. If you could donate to Point of View, we'd so appreciate that. Okay, so I started this show out today. It seems like so long ago. We've been on a bunch of topics today. I started this show out today talking with you about the decision by the Donald Trump administration to approach through regulation to redefine gender under Title IX, the federal law preventing gender discrimination in various ways, in education mainly. But the point is the DHS is announcing that they are going to change the definition of gender back to the traditional. There are two genders. There's male and female, and that the 8 years under President Obama, where the term gender was redefined and reconfigured, and we now, in the latest tally, was 72 different genders have been identified or exist in some people's worldview. And so, what the Trump administration is doing is saying essentially, they're not stopping anyone from, as an adult, if they choose to engage in gender transition. They're not stopping anyone from using any words they want to use for conducting their life and living their life as the gender they choose. What they're simply doing is saying, in the regulations, we're no longer going to contemplate in federal law and federal regulation that gender means something other than that. The gender is what the anatomy with which you are born is your gender. And so it has legal implications of all kinds in a positive way. It takes confusion and really societal experimentation with ideas out of the arena of law, but it doesn't it doesn't in any way inhibit someone's ability as an adult to choose to change their gender or conduct their lives in acting as though they're a member of the opposite gender. So that was one issue. I think it's a great move. I think it's obviously a huge blowback from the American left and from all sorts of advocacy groups for the LGBT community, for the advocates for the transgender movement. They are calling it just an attack and unfair, but honestly, it's a return to common sense. This hasn't happened yet, but a memo was written within the Department of Health and Human Services that was leaked or shared in some way with the New York Times, and they're running with the story. I just think it's an example of President Trump's cutting through political correctness and honestly, in some cases, kind of just political crazy, and saying we're going to go back to what we all know is true without inhibiting anyone's right to live their life the way they want. So that happened. Loved any comments you want to make on that story. And I also wanted to talk briefly in this one segment where we don't have a guest, because we do have a guest coming up again. in the final at 2:30, the final half an hour of the show. But I want to come back to the other story, which made a lot of headlines this week, and which I included in my own radio show. Had a long segment on it, and this is the now confirmed murder of a U.S. He's not a U.S. citizen, but he was considered a U.S. person, a person with legal status here in America, Jamal Khashoggi. And he was a Muslim who was living in America, an occasional columnist for the Washington Post, and he entered the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. So he's in the country of Turkey, and the Saudi Arabian, either the embassy or the consulate in Turkey, went in the front door October 2nd, never came out again. And it is now clear that he was murdered, and apparently at the hands of the Saudi Arabians. I want to give you just a little more background about that and just talk about what America should do and all the challenges under this decision, because of this action apparently by the Saudi Arabians. To start with, Khashoggi was not an American citizen. Although he's considered an American person. He's a strong Muslim Brotherhood supporter. In fact, the term is political Islam. He's a supporter of political Islam, meaning he agrees with that segment or faction of Islam that believes it is morally obligated to push Sharia, push Islamic law and foist it on unwilling people. I mean, it's a very strident Islamist mindset that he embraced. He defended it. He wrote a recent editorial trying to describe the Muslim Brotherhood as a bunch of swell, nice people and getting wrongly maligned. And the Muslim Brotherhood itself is not a terrorist organization, but it is a strident supporter of many terrorist organizations and of pushing the mindset that says essentially Islam, followers of Islam, people who are to be a devout and genuine Muslim, you must push the kill or convert infidels mindset. You must push through violence or surreptitious means the takeover by Islam of the world, essentially getting around to a caliphate. So that's who the Muslim Brotherhood is, and that's what he was a part of. Part of why he got so sideways with Saudi Arabia is that they use the initials MBS, but the current Saudi Arabian prince who is in charge, or who is running this effort in Saudi Arabia to allegedly modernize Islam within Saudi Arabia. So this MBS guy and this modernization of Saudi Arabia included that they have arrested some of the more radical imams. They haven't executed them, but they have arrested them, placed them in jail, told them essentially this radical Islam has to end. So Saudi Arabia is trying to modernize somewhat a religion that's a faith, Islam, which is pretty darn hard to modernize, but they're trying to modernize it within Saudi Arabia, trying to crack down on the most extreme of the imams, actually arresting them, trying to bring about a modernization of Saudi Arabia, which, as a small example, it was only earlier this year, 2018, that women in Saudi Arabia won the right to drive. I mean, that's how astonishingly backward that country is, and backward in terms of following Sharia. So this Khashoggi guy who was murdered in the embassy in Turkey at the hands of the Saudi Arabians was a more strict Islamist than the Saudi Arabian regime that's trying to modernize Islam to a certain degree within Saudi Arabia. But so the murder apparently occurred. The Saudi Arabians have had numerous stories as to how it exactly happened, but it is obvious that the Saudi Arabian team or hit team squad arrived by plane the day before and were there at the embassy at the time of this murder. We come back from the break. I want to just talk about what a challenge this places on America, challenges places on our government, because we do have very few even quasi-ish allies within the Middle East, within Muslim-majority countries, Saudi Arabia being among them, and also among the countries that helps hedge the astonishing threat coming from the Iranians. So lots of intrigue and political calculations. So come back. We'll talk more about Saudi Arabia, Khashoggi. And this is Debbie Georgatos on Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Most Christians understand that the problems facing America are not going to be solved in Washington, but it's noteworthy when a sitting U.S. senator says that politics can't solve our political problems. That was the title of a commentary by Senator Ben Sasse. He believes that the tribalism in our nation has a deeper source and is tied to loneliness in America. We are relational beings and want to be in tribes, and he observes that the traditional tribes that have sustained humans for millennia are simultaneously in collapse. Those would be family, friendships, and communities of worship. At the core of this is loneliness in America. This is not a new problem. A quarter century ago, I wrote a book with the title Signs of Warning, Signs of Hope. One of the chapters dealt with a crisis of loneliness. A book we often quote on our radio program is Bowling Alone, written by Harvard social scientist Robert Putnam. He says we no longer are involved in community. We often move and have few friends, and we have few shared projects and belong to fewer civic groups. On the other hand, we don't want to be left out. We don't want to feel like the same isolation we felt at the edge of the cafeteria or as the last kid picked for kickball. So we yearn for a group, often a political ideology, on the basis of our intimate connections. Our cable news tribes offer a common experience. Now, to reverse these trends, we need to read his new book, Them, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal. In his commentary, he shares how he and his wife put down roots in a small community and became friends with people from every race and income bracket. We must find ways to replenish the social capital and reverse the tribal conflict in our culture. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Graceworks Pictures, Indivisible, based on the true story of Army Chaplain Darren Turner and his wife Heather. Rated PG-13, opens October 26th, indivisiblemovie.com.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Okay, so I want to try to get this story in before, again, we have another guest coming at 2:30. Sometimes it's really funny. I'll do my own radio show for 2 hours with no guests. I'm fine with that. Sometimes we have a bunch of guests. Well, today on this show on Point of View, coming up at 2:30 Texas time, Central Time, our final guest will be joining us, Ana Quintana, and she's with the Heritage Foundation, and she's has actually visited Honduras several times. And so we're going to talk with her about this caravan originating in Honduras, making its way up through Guatemala, then Mexico, and on its way to the American border, and kind of how it got started down there, how bad the conditions are, what the political implications are, and who's really behind it. And I think it's important to understand that this is, I'm not going to put words in her mouth. These are my words. But this is an invasion. This is an invasion at the southern border. It is a decision by the range, the size of this caravan changes and keeps growing, but it's up to at least 7,000 people, and it's people who are very open, saying when they are and when they get to America, they expect to cross into America and demand asylum or apply for asylum, which we don't have to let them do. But this is it's a challenge, kind of culturally, politically. It's a challenge about whether or not we're going to just say, these people are poor, we have a lot of money, how could we say no? Or are we going to say, actually, we do insist in America on a rule of law, and that we have to recognize the political momentum behind this, the efforts of very leftist organizations in this world who are globalist in nature, who do not support the idea of national borders. we have to recognize those. We cannot respond to this caravan in the dark or in the abstract without recognizing the forces behind it, including an organization called Pueblo Sin Fronteras, which is basically Village Without Borders. It's a group that really does advocate against borders of any kind, really despises borders in America. And that's a group pushing this. And you think about in the abstract, how did that number of people in a dirt poor country somehow acquire, it's something like 20 days are going to have to be walking, 28 days, I don't remember the number, but I mean, people who don't have any food or anything, allegedly, or very limited supplies, somehow found the wherewithal and backpacks and supplies to go on this trek. This is not, the point is, this is not a spontaneous outburst, a spontaneous movement by people who are poor. This is a contrived, paid for manipulation. We'll see if she agrees, but that's what I have to say about it. But turning back to stories I want to share with you. And again, this seems to be a quiet day in the phones. That's okay, because heaven knows I'm happy to talk about all the issues facing America if we don't get callers, but you're certainly welcome to call. And again, the number here to call, if you want to call into Point of View, it's 800-351-1212. Happy to talk about the issue from the first hour of the day, the very beginning of the show today, about the Trump administration redefining gender back into actually being two genders of all astonishing things. Also happy to talk about the story I was on right before our last break, this murder of an American, not an American citizen. I think the term they're actually using is an American person, but he was a gentleman who had legal right to live here in America. I think he was on a green card, Jamal Khashoggi, and he is he's Muslim, and he was an occasional columnist in the Washington Post, more of the radical end of Islam, more radical than the current Saudi Arabian government that's trying to, in some degree, modernize. And I will tell you, my own radio show, which is called America Can We Talk, and again, quick pitch for America Can We Talk, Sunday evenings, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. You can watch it right here on Facebook Live at America Can We Talk. I had a national security expert on who was making the point. She was making the point on the show that, we differentiate between, radical Islam and moderate Islam and all sorts of labels we put next to it, and Shia and Sunni. But at its core, Islam is Islam. I mean, Islam has Sharia as a fundamental component of Islam, and it is a rule of law, a approach to law that's profoundly and utterly and completely inconsistent with the rule of law in America. But anyway, back to Khashoggi. What I wanted to say, and she said it's pronounced Khashoggi on my radio show, the expert I have, the national security person. But what I was going to say about it is it's a very challenging thing for America, because on the one hand, we don't have a lot of close buddies here in the Middle East, a lot of close allies. We have many organizations over there, many countries, many governments that mean us harm. The Middle East is filled with Islamic terrorists of various kinds, Hezbollah and Hamas, and you can run down the whole list of them, and they all mean harm to America, and they all want to destroy Israel, our one and only true ally over there. And Saudi Arabia has been kind of our friend. It's like 100-year friendship. And we also trade with Saudi Arabia. We sell them military military equipment. We sell them planes. It is not a minor relationship we have with them. Saudi Arabia is also an aid to America in trying to tamp down the Iranian hegemonic threat. Iran, as I'm sure you are aware, is the single largest terror exporting country in the world. Iran is worse. I mean, there are many bad actors over there in the Middle East. Iran is the worst, kind of by a landslide. And they are the ones who are pushing in various other skirmishes and battles and wars going on, pushing to extend their influence, their control over the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is our ally pushing back against Iran. So on the one hand, what my national security expert was saying is we have to find some way to punish them. We can't let the murder of this American person go unpunished. But on the other hand, we can't, this is not possibly a justification for ending our relationship with Saudi Arabia, or severing ties, or cutting off ties, or refusing to sell them any of the military equipment. And number one, because they'll make other allies if they don't have us. I mean, they're not just going to sit home and do nothing if we cut off ourselves as their allies. And they're going to buy military equipment from other people. We'd rather have them buy it from us. So so there is that challenge there. But we also, the signal to the Islamic world of the failure of America to stand up for one of its own people, that is also not okay. I mean, if we don't send a very serious signal to the Islamic world, if you dare capture one of our people, if you dare take someone who is and appears Khashoggi was murdered in a most grotesque and horrific manner, we can't let that go unpunished. And so we've got to find a way, both because Saudi Arabia needs to understand, no matter how upset you are, Saudi Arabia, with the way this guy writes in the Washington Post about what his opinions are, that he's a more radical Muslim than the Muslims running Saudi Arabia. The fact that you're upset with him, you can't just hurt an American person. You can't kill an American and have it go unpunished. So there's that. And so I see we do have one caller, and this day has been very quiet for calls. We only have 2 minutes left. So I'm going to take caller number 2 if we can on the immigration issue. We have like 2 minutes in this segment. Hello? No, we don't have him.
Hello?
Hi, this is Debbie Georgatos on Point of View. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, hello. This is Debbie Georgatos on Point of View. You called in about immigration?
Oh, yes, I did. There you are. Yeah, I listened to what you were saying there. And, you do consider it as an invasion. I mean, as a threat, coming across the border illegally. And the people mixed in and all that, but you don't know what kind of diseases and, other stuff that they're bringing in. You know what I mean?
I sure do. It's one of the risks we have every time. And thank you for your call so much. I'm so glad you called in. It's right. We don't know the diseases. We don't know their intent. We don't know. They're all saying, we're just coming to America. We want jobs. We want to work. But, you can have terrorists mixed in with that. You can have human traffickers mixed in. You can have all sorts of people who mean us harm. And so and trying to process 7,000 people at the border at one time. We don't have the resources to do that. And it's also a misuse of the asylum process that would say we're going to have all those people at one time at our border. Sir, I didn't even catch your name, but I'm glad.
Tim.
Tim. I'm so glad you called, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm really glad about that.
Can I ask one more thing, too?
Sure.
Is it true that when they came out of Honduras, that they were actually supposed to apply for amnesty in the first state that they come to? Is that true? It
is a great closing point of this segment, and you are so right. Asylum laws in virtually every country, including America, require, if you're seeking asylum, you're escaping persecution, you're supposed to ask for asylum in the first country you get into, meaning they all needed to apply in Guatemala. And I think and some of them are applying in Mexico. They made it to Mexico. Mexico is very strict about their asylum laws, as we need to be, and they are discovering that they're not meeting the asylum standards. Okay, folks, we're up against a break. I can't believe it. Thank you, Tim, for your call. We come back from the break, and we're going to have another guest join us, so come right back.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
So there's this guy named Jordan. He's a healthy guy. He's a dad of 6, and he works as a guide in Alaska. And he goes to the doctor, true story, he goes to the doctor, and he's diagnosed with cancer, stage 4. And here's the thing. He had switched earlier from medical insurance to Medishare, where Christians share each other's medical bills. So the question for Jordan and his wife, Jenny, was, is this actually going to work?
Our medical bills exceeded $160,000. Medishare members shared all our bills.
And it was about more than just the money, too. This is a real community.
Medishare is a family, a group of people that stick with you through the hardest times of your life. I just don't know how I could have done it without Medishare.
It's so worth looking into. There's a reason this is growing so fast. So if you want to find out more, here is a number for you. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And hello, this is Debbie Georgatos. So glad you're tuned in today to Point of View. Just a great place to be every single day, noon to 3 Central Time, talking to whether I'm hosting or, of course, Kirby Anderson, the main host. I'm substituting for him today. Well, we had in mind a guest at this segment. I think we may have had a time zone communication issue. So, yes, we had a time zone communication issue. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just tell you who I wanted to have talk with us, and then see if we can, and maybe we'll still try if we can get her. I'm going to actually text her while I'm talking to you. Okay. So, yeah, let me just do this. Okay. So here we go. I'll tell you her story. Her name is Ana Quintana, or Ana Quintana, and I think she might have thought we probably failed to communicate on the time zones, but she is a very, very interesting and informed person. She's a senior policy analyst for Latin America and the Western Hemisphere at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. But what's really interesting, beside that she does extremely good work for Heritage Foundation, is that she's actually traveled to Honduras more than once and in recent years. And so when this Honduran caravan issue arose this week, she had so much to add in terms of what it's like down there and what was really occurring. So I'm going to share, I think we have on the website one article, a reference to an article that she wrote about it from Heritage Foundation. And her article is called Caravan Activists Are Weaponizing Poor Central Americans. And so what she's making the point is that, Honduras is desperately poor. I mentioned earlier, it's, the average is either $230, $270 a month that people live on. And so obviously they're scrapping and scrambling to just get food on the table. And so we Americans, of course, send aid, and maybe that we need to send more aid, or aid in different forms, or aid in more pragmatic form. I mean, there may be adjustments needed to the kind of aid we send. And I think we always do try to reassess it, reappraise whether we could be helping better, but we send about $100 million a year. However, what's happened in Honduras is this group, now you have to picture, just a desperately underdeveloped country, a lot of poverty. How many people in that situation would actually think on their own, let's form a caravan of people, of 4,000 people, and walk thousands of miles, walk thousands of miles through Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, to get to the U.S. border and present ourselves at the U.S. border and seek asylum. These people are walking in desperate conditions, obviously. They, they have their children, they're probably everything they own, the entire planet Earth, on their shoulders. And this is the point of it being, this did not come about, organically. It really wasn't that a bunch of poor people stood around in town and said, okay, let's just band together. This is being pushed. And one point that she made, this Ana Quintana made, was that the caravan was organized by a former Honduran legislator and a member of the radical leftist Libre, Libre. He's a radical leftist Libre party. His name is Bartolo Fuentes. So Bartolo Fuentes was behind organizing this group in his own country, former legislator. He banded them together. This is a very left-wing tactic. It's carried out by leftists throughout the world, band together. It's just kind of textbook leftism. So he got them banded together. And there's a video that was released actually by a Florida Republican congressman named Representative Gates, where you can show money being handed out to these people. And when who are headed out in this caravan, the caravan appeared to be, the video thought at first that the video had taken place in Honduras, but actually appears it was it actually occurred in Guatemala. But the point is, these people are being paid money, and you think about it, if you don't have enough money to eat every day, how are you packing food to walk? And it's like 27 days, some crazy thing, to get to America. You're not. You're being helped along the way. In fact, there were stories of being cheered by the crowds as they walk through various cities. They're going to end up in the desert area of Mexico as a hurricane is going to be coming through. And they've had relief. They've had people along the way in these countries providing them food, providing them shelter, providing them, encouraging them. And this is why people have gone from calling it or people are rightly labeling it, this is an invasion. And I know that there are many Americans of every background and frankly, including mostly, especially Christian, loving Americans, people who want to help, the other guy and look out for the other guy, that watch this and they say, my gosh, if you're that hungry and you're that desperate that you would risk your life to, walk for 20 days to get the American border, surely we can take you in. This is the mindset. Surely we can take you in. Surely you can join, you can come into America. And, we've got abundance. We have so much here. We can accommodate these people. That is the argument of the mindset of the American left. And this is a really crucial battle in America in this election season. This is to use a crass political term, it is simply a political stunt. It's a political stunt by the left-wing mindset, not just of the individual in Honduras who got it organized, Bartolo Fuentes, who, by the way, as he crossed into Guatemala, was arrested. I'm not sure what for. But he put this idea together. The crowd swells from between 4,000, 6,000, 7,000, all sorts of different people. And people being added. And some of them did, as the caller earlier was asking about, well, doesn't the standard of asylum laws requires you to make an asylum request in the first country you get to? And that is true. And so many of them, I don't know if any of them sought asylum in Guatemala, but they did seek asylum in Mexico. And I want to spend a minute on that. Mexico is among the most strict countries in terms of asylum. And I want to just talk generally about the asylum concept to be sure we all get what it is. People who apply, who are in countries where they are the victim of persecution, where they are, they can prove they're because of their identity, their race, religion, national, their ethnicity, whatever, are going to be the subject of persecution. People whose lives are actually in danger because of their political views or their race or ethnicity. These people can stay in their home countries and apply for refugee status. That is how refugees come to America. They apply for refugee status. You have to meet one of the qualifying conditions, you have to meet one of the categories that you permit people to enter as refugees, and then you can be granted refugee status. And then you come here. So that refugee status means you stay where you are until you get permission, and America processes refugee applications. We have on the show, I think, talked in the past. I have on my own show talked about this. But the second thing, the related point is that asylum is exactly the same thing as the refugee situation, except asylum applies those same standards to people who somehow make their way into the U.S. borders. Once you're in America, it's technically not applying for refugee status because you're already here in America. You're applying for asylum, but it's the same standards that apply. It is not a standard. It is not a qualifying condition under the refugee/asylum law because you're poor. Poverty is not a reason. It's intended, the law is intended to help people who are they are victims of political persecution. That's who is intended to be helped, or racial persecution. Not because you're poor, not because you're the victim of domestic violence, not because of all sorts of reasons that may make your life miserable. And the point is that it relates to the rule of law, it relates to the idea of how we use asylum. So back to these Honduran, this caravan coming up toward America, that caravan is comprised of people who are mainly saying, we want to come to America because we're poor and we need jobs. And they could have stayed in their home country and applied for refugee status and not made it, or they could have applied to become a citizen. The point is they're not using the laws we have. They're not applying for citizenship. They're not applying for refugee status. They're essentially saying, because I'm going to walk these thousands of miles between Honduras and the southern border of America here in Texas, that you're going to admit us. You're going to be forced to let us in. And once we're here, we'll get back to explain this after the break, what the problem is. But once they're here, we have to process them under the asylum standards. And we have to process them, especially when they bring children, a whole nother complicating element. And this is why I say it's a political stunt. These people will arrive at the southern border of America very close to Election Day. I think this is a major misfire by the American left, a notion that somehow Trump or the Republicans will be made to look mean because we don't just immediately admit all of them. And I think it's going to backfire. We'll talk about that when we come back from the break. I'm Debbie Georgatos, filling in for Kirby Anderson. Point of View. Come right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Most residents of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania probably have no idea what their county seal looks like. It has a cow, factories, a silo, an oil lamp set on 2 books, a courthouse, flags and bunting, and more. Recently, a federal district court reluctantly declared the seal unconstitutional because, centered in the background of it all, is a cross. According to the court's opinion, quote, the county has not legally compelled its citizens to practice and conform to Christianity, infringed on freedom of conscience, or created political conflict between the Christian church and other religious sects. Simply put, the county of Lehigh did not intend to establish religion or institute a county religion, unquote. And so the court concluded, quote, Lehigh County's seal is a passive symbol that does not coerce any citizen to practice or adhere to Christianity and does not establish a county religion. Thus, the seal does not violate the plain text of the Establishment Clause, nor does it establish a religion in the way the drafters of the First Amendment imagined. Higher courts, however, have delineated a different mechanism by which the court must determine whether the seal survives constitutional scrutiny. While the court may not fully agree with the test provided, the court must apply that test, unquote. Well, we can only hope an appeal will change that test. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Students and teachers are being told that prayer, Bibles, and religion are illegal in public school, but that's not true. Learn the facts. Read your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org right now. Don't let anyone steal your freedom with bad information. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Okay, this is Debbie Georgatos. Welcome back to Point of View. Love filling in for Kirby Anderson. We have one last segment. We could take callers. It's 800-351-1212. Had a unfortunate time zone communication issue with our guest, and so we don't have her joining. So it means that's just us chickens here talking about the issue. But the issue I want to talk in this last segment has to do with this Honduran caravan making its way toward America. And all I really want to say, a couple other points to make about it that I think really matter. You know, I think that during the last 8 years prior to this current presidency, there was a laxity with respect to approach the southern border, a laxity with respect to immigration laws, and lack of desire to enforce them firmly, and a whole notion that came from a host of messages coming from America, messages coming from the more liberal side of our politicians, that America was really kind of open to, America was susceptible to, America was open to having more people come to this country over our southern border, that we would be lax about finding whether they really met asylum standards, that we would just, we welcome them pouring over the border. We've had, and so this was one of the things that President Trump in his campaign in 2016, one of the seminal issues was, securing the southern border, reinstating importance of following the immigration laws, not permitting lawlessness to expand, that we had more people coming here who didn't have the right to be here. And so there was a message that this was coming in his campaign. and an attendant increase in people charging over the border want to be in the country before we begin enforcing our laws again. So here we sit facing the midterms. We're in October of 2016, midterms or whatever it is, 2 weeks away. And we have people who are now appearing on the southern border or headed to the southern border in a mass movement. I am telling you, as sure as I'm sitting here, that I think that this was a miscalculation, a misread of the mood of the American people by leftists in the world, and especially leftists in our country, the idea that this caravan coming to America, demanding to be admitted to the country, seeking asylum, basically based on poverty, which is not a ground for being granted asylum, and thinking that because they showed up at the border and the media would happily and complicitly show lots of sympathetic pictures, that number one, you would have a more likely outcome that Republicans would lose the midterms because people would be able to characterize Republicans and President Trump in particular as mean and uncaring, and the American left is so nicer. Compounded with that was because of all of the really unjustified criticism of President Trump with respect to the border policy of separating children and from their moms, who turned out sometimes weren't their moms, they were actually human traffickers. But President Trump dropped the zero tolerance policy in June of this year. He had a zero tolerance policy at the border, mocked and maligned so much by the American left that he dropped it, and this is considered by many to have aggravated the border crossing issue, the idea of this people appearing at the border and demanding to be admitted. And then so that happened in June, and now you have people headed to the border, election cycle coming, and people are trying to figure out how we respond to this group. One other thing I wanted to mention, when I say this is an invasion, I do mean that term, and I mean they aren't armed. But if they were armed, we would be sending the military down there, and I'm fine with sending the military down there to stop this. Because the other thing that this is going on is this is funded, this is supported, funded, and encouraged by a group called Pueblo Sin Fronteras. You may be able to tell from the way I pronounce that I never took Spanish because I grew up in upstate New York. We learned French in school. But anyway, the group called Pueblo Sin Fronteras, which basically means village without borders, or to shorten it, just the no border movement. This is a globalist movement. This is a socialist movement. This is an anti-American movement. This movement was behind the previous horde of people it was March of this year, of 2018, people moving through Mexico, intending to come up to the southern border, demanding to be admitted. That movement was also funded by this Pueblo Sin Fronteras. They're absolutely ardent, strident advocates for the idea that the countries in this world shouldn't have borders. There shouldn't even really be countries. We don't need national identity. We need a globalist mindset. We need a globalist mindset in solving problems. We need a global government. We need a one world government. I mean, this is who these people are. Pueblo Sin Fronteras, and they are supporting this Honduran caravan of people. They are encouraging not just the people by supplying them, but they're working with organizations inside America, very left-wing socialist groups, to soften the American public's perception of this, to make American public see stories and pictures that cause people to say, well, gosh, we can't just let them, we have to do something. We have to take care of them. We can't just let them starve. They're going to be in the desert of Mexico in the middle of this hurricane, or whatever the weather is going to be like. It's going to be horrible. It is a truly profound manipulation of the American people, or an attempted manipulation. I think it will backfire. I think the American people are going to see more and more that this leftist, socialist, globalist mindset really is intended to undo America. So Pueblo San Fronteras behind it. I did see a quick poll. I see we have one caller. See if we have time to take him or her. But there was a poll by Rasmussen that the majority of Americans say you cannot let these people in. No. Now that there's also 38% disagree, and they want the government to let them in temporarily until each case is individually reviewed. Folks, if we do that, we'll have caravan after caravan after caravan after caravan. It will never end. The world is sadly filled with impoverished people. We can't feed them all here. We can't house them all here. We can't take them all in. We have to have our system. And if, as I said, we may need to increase aid to Honduras. I don't know. That's one thing to look at. But we don't just say we'll surrender our borders, because like in any other way, it's like surrendering to terrorism. Once you tell them that you can use a terroristic attack mob like this, then you have nowhere else to go. Okay, we have a caller. We do have 2 minutes left. I'm a quick try to take this call. And I cannot read the person's name, but we have one caller ready. So, hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Debbie Georgatos. Go ahead.
Yes. This is indeed a political stunt. I agree with you 100%. It's like Brett Kavanaugh hearing. If we let this group get away with it, there will be another. I'm understanding that these people are poor, and I'm sympathetic to it. But, you know, we're a Christian nation that's governed by laws. Everybody should be abiding under these laws. Romans 13 says every person's to be in subjection to the governing authorities. There's no authority except that which comes from God. And whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God. People say, well, back in Israel of old, the alien was taken in. Well, I think he should remember when the alien was taken in, he became a Jewish proselyte, and it started with circumcision. So we're a nation of laws. Let's keep them. That's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What was your name, ma'am?
Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you. That was a great call and a great way to wrap up our show today. We have 1 minute left. So, Rebecca, thank you for that call. Love that point. What you're seeing, and I agree with her analogy, in the Kavanaugh hearing, what you see is left-wing mob conduct. What you're seeing in this is a mob at the border. And the question is, do we have the will, the backbone, the courage as American citizens to say, we don't bow to mob rule. We consistently assert our right to the rule of law and to the idea of America. Okay, folks, I love sitting in for Kirby Anderson. I'm Debbie Georgatos. This was Point of View. Go to pointofview.net. Check out this wonderful, wonderful ministry. Please consider supporting it. It blesses people every day. And tune into my radio show Sunday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. America Can We Talk, right here on, you can do it on Facebook Live, America Can We Talk. And every week come into Point of View. We love talking truth about America. Talk to you next time.
From Graceworks Pictures comes Indivisible, based on the true story of Army Chaplain Darren Turner and his wife Heather.
It is with great honor that I have served my country. But I only stand before you today because Jesus is my rock, and because I have a family who loves and believes in me.
One marriage, one family, under God. Indivisible. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Now playing. More information is available at indivisiblemovie.com.
A major problem with socialism is that it allows people to benefit from the hard work of others. It permits the idle and indifferent to live off the efforts of their neighbors. For a society to prosper, everyone who is able has to contribute. And that's the only way Point of View Radio can bring you truth. We are profoundly thankful for you who have joined the Truth Team and make this program possible. If you're not on board, join today. Invest in our future together. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.